This aircraft, though it was just a modified airliner put to military use, was such a good design that it became the most successful cargo aircraft of World War II. It was used in many different roles and stayed in service for decades after the war, and many of them still fly up to this day. This was the Douglas C-47 Skytrain, the military version of the famous Douglas DC-3 airliner. So let's see the history of this aircraft today. To understand the history of the C-47, we need to go back to its roots, all the way to the very beginning of the 1930s. In the early 1930s, the airline still used mostly obsolete aircraft, which flew very slowly and at low altitudes, like the Fokker F-7 and F-10 and the Ford Trimotor. But after a TWA flight crashed in 1931 when its wing failed, fears emerged in the industry about the old wooden airliners. So the US Department of Commerce put in place new restrictions on wooden planes used as airliners, which resulted in many new designs from the manufacturers. One of the earliest and most successful was the Boeing 247, which first flew in 1933 and was a modern all-metal cantilever monoplane capable of carrying 10 passengers at a top speed of 200 miles an hour. But the manufacturing capacity of Boeing was tied down because of their partnership with United Airlines, who ordered 60 of the new aircraft. So the other companies who wanted these new planes would have needed to wait for those. TWA also needed a new plane, but they refused to wait for the Boeing one and slipped behind United. So in August 1932, they sent requests to other manufacturers with their specifications for a new plane design. They requested a new all-metal monoplane powered by 3 engines of at least 500 horsepower each, a range of at least 1080 miles, at least 185 miles an hour top speed, 150 miles an hour cruise speed, ability to carry 12 passengers, and a service ceiling of 10,000 feet. But they had one less requirement, which was not standard. The new aircraft had to be able to take off safely from any TWA airfield, even if it lost an engine. From the designs proposed, the Douglas one was the most modern by far, and even though it only had 2 engines, it exceeded the requirements, reaching a top speed of 210 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 190. Its service ceiling was 23,000 feet, more than double of the requirements. The two companies soon signed a contract for the prototype plane, designated Douglas Commercial 1, or DC-1. And only a few months later, Douglas already finished the aircraft. It had many modern features. The fuselage was big enough so passengers could stand up comfortably. It was soundproofed, featured a lavatory, and heating for the passengers. The prototype made its maiden flight in July 1933, and in the following 3 months passed every test with flying colors. During this time, the DC-1 made a stop at Wright Field as well, where the US military tested it. TWA was very satisfied at the end of the trials, and the company placed an order for 20 of the improved version of the type. Though the military liked the DC-1 as well, they decided to wait for this new improved version too. Only one DC-1 was built, and the improved version, known as DC-2, soon appeared. The new improved variant was very similar to the DC-1, but it was 2 feet longer. It also featured a new bigger rudder, flaps on the wings, and other modifications. The prototype was finished in May 1934 and made its maiden flight in the same month. The new improved version made a big impression to the airlines all over the world, and Douglas received many orders for the DC-2. They even sold production license to several other companies, like Fokker, Airspeed, and the Nakajima Company in Japan. Later, when the Japanese were developing their own bombers, like the Mitsubishi G3M, the Nakajima Company offered their LB-2 bomber as an alternative, which they developed from the DC-2. If you want to know more about the Japanese bombers, I have already made videos featuring those, so check them out. The US War Department, waiting for the improved version, finally decided to request a military variant of the plane. At that time, the main transport planes for the army were the obsolete Ford Trimotor and Fokker types, and they very much wanted to replace them. Still, the first orders for the type arrived from the Navy, who acquired 5 of the DC-2 models, which received the designation R2D1. At the same time, the Army modification of the type, the XC-32, was under development. But since at first these planes were just intended to be used as VIP transports, the main differences from the civilian type were just the radio and several other military equipment installed. But soon the real modifications of the type started to arrive. The first of them was the C-33. This model was the first real transport variant, with all the civilian luxury removed, a bigger cargo door installed, the floor reinforced, and several other modifications. The later C-39 transport was a much bigger modification, which combined many of the DC-2 and the following DC-3 features, and it was powered by 975 horsepower Wright engines, which allowed the payload to increase to 3,600 pounds. The next step in the evolution of the Douglas design, though eventually it became famous as the DC-3 model, initially started its life as the DST, which was designed to satisfy the needs from airlines for a bigger plane than the DC-2, with bigger passenger capacity, cabin area, and possibility for sleeper berths. The daylight transport variant was the DC-3, which could carry up to 28 passengers and didn't have the convertible seats, while the DST could carry 14 passengers with sleeping accommodation. As a result, these variants were longer and wider than the previous model, featuring stronger wings and a 10 feet wider wingspan. They also had a bigger tail to fix the slight instability experienced with the DC-2 model. The engines were also upgraded to 1000 horsepower Wright 1820G types. The all DC variants could be built with similar performance Pratt & Whitney engines as well. Those variants were the DST-A and DC-3A versions. The new model made its maiden flight in December 1935, and though it was in production in parallel with the military C-39 variants, the armed forces were not really interested in the bigger plane until the US entered the war. The first military variant of the DC-3 was the C-41A, which similarly to the earlier C-32 conversion was a standard DC-3A converted with military equipment to serve as a VIP transport for the army. Only one was built from this model and it was delivered in 1939. And finally, not long after, the C-47 Skytrain was developed. The US Army Air Force, realizing the war brewing all around the world and their capabilities lacking, ordered the first batch of C-47s just 3 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the first of these planes entered service at the end of December 1941. The C-47's military modifications largely followed the footsteps of the earlier C-33 variant. It was based on the civilian DC-3A model and used 1200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines. The passenger door was replaced by a large 3-section cargo door. The passenger seats removed and replaced with folding seats. Initially these were canvas, later metal seats. The floor of the aircraft was reinforced and the wingspan increased by 6 inches. Additionally, they featured an astrodome on the upper fuselage. The new plane could carry up to 6,000 pounds of cargo and could be outfitted as cargo transport, troop carrier, flying ambulance, and for many other roles. Later versions were equipped for glider towing as well. The Army designation for the new cargo aircraft was C-47DL, while the ones delivered to the Navy were called R4D1. No one knew at the time the first C-47s were delivered that more than 10,000 of them will follow, and the type will be in service for decades after World War II, all around the world. The Douglas plane, though it was in all fairness just a slightly modified airliner, had so many variants and different uses over its lifetime that listing them all would be too much, so we will just mention the most prominent and most unique ones. The C-47 was the basic military variant, which was modified for many roles with different equipment and engines. It was used as VIP transport, photo reconnaissance, search and rescue plane, and so on. The C-47B variants were equipped with 2-stage superchargers for high-altitude use, specifically to fly the China-India route over the Himalayas. The XC-47C was built as a float plane experiment. The AC-47D was a gunship version, used in many different variants during the Vietnam War. The EX-47N was an electronic warfare version. These so-called electric goons were equipped with several antennas and surveillance equipment. There was even a non-powered glider variant tested from the type, which, though it didn't go to production, showed very good performance. One of the most well-known variants was the C-53 Skytrooper, a dedicated troop transport, built without the reinforced floor and big cargo door to carry parachute troops and to tow gliders. If you would like to know the history of the two most numerous Allied World War II gliders, the WWII CG-4 and the British Airspeed Horsa, I have already made a video on those. The C-47 was 63 feet 9 inches long, with a wingspan of 95 feet 6 inches. It had an empty weight of 18,135 pounds and a maximum takeoff weight of 31,000 pounds. The plane was powered by two Pratt & Whitney R1830 radial engines, producing 1200 horsepower each. It could reach a top speed of 224 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 160 miles an hour. The plane had a combat range of 1,600 miles and a ferry range of 3,600 miles, and its service ceiling was 26,400 feet. During World War II, the C-47 played a crucial role in numerous operations. It was used in airborne assaults, dropping paratroopers behind enemy lines, and it also transported supplies and evacuated wounded soldiers. Its ability to operate from rough, unimproved airfields made it a great asset. In the European theater, they participated in many major operations. They dropped paratroopers during the invasion of Sicily in July 1943. A year later, another 1,000 of them transported paratroopers behind enemy lines during the Normandy landings. By the end of the day, more than 23,000 paratroopers landed in France, many of them carried by C-47s and C-53s. They were used in even bigger numbers not long after in the ill-fated Operation Market Garden, where 1,400 of them were used. Sadly, the operation was a failure. The C-47s carried airdrops to the city of Bastogne during its siege in December to help the encircled Allied troops. A few months later, in March 1945, they were again used in numbers in Operation Varsity, the airborne crossing of the Rhine River. On the Pacific theater, they took part in operations at Guadalcanal, New Guinea, Burma, and many more. They had a big part flying supplies to China from India as well. As in the European theater, they were not only used for cargo missions, but to drop paratroopers and carry wounded as well. But the type had more specialized roles as well. It was an established towing aircraft for gliders, but it could also snatch gliders up from the ground. The Skytrain had to fly very low and slow for this, so it could catch the wire race for the operation and start towing the glider. They were even used in aerial wire laying for communications as well. The plane carrying the communication cable dropped the end with a parachute at one of the stations, and as it flew towards the other station, released the wire through a special porthole. The Douglas plane was also used by other Allied countries. The British had around 2,000 C-47s, which they named Dakotas. The Soviet Union purchased around 40 DC-3s before World War II, and a license to build them in 1936. The Soviet-built plane, though at first it was planned to be a copy of the Douglas design, in the end had more than 1,000 modifications, and first it was designated PS-84, then later Li-2. Though towards the end of the war, newer designs, like the Douglas C-54 started to arrive, the C-47s were not ready to retire yet. After World War II, they were used in various military and civilian operations around the world. In 1948, they participated in the Berlin airlift, supplying food and other necessities to the people during the Soviet blockade. They served on after World War II and participated in the Korean War, where the C-47s were used for troop transport, cargo, and medical evacuation missions, just like before. Its versatility and durability made it a valuable asset, as it coped well with the challenging conditions in Korea. But the old plane marched on even after the Korean War, and went into action again a few years later, now in Vietnam. This time, apart from its usual roles, the C-47 was used as a gunship, equipped with miniguns, and also as a reconnaissance and electronic warfare aircraft. The C-47s participated in the Indo-Pakistani War in 1947 as well, where both sides used these planes. The US Air Force retired its last C-47 in 1975, but the type was still in use in other parts of the world, and many of the military planes were later converted for civilian use. These aircraft continued to serve in various roles around the world, from passenger and cargo transport to more specialized missions, such as area spraying, firefighting, and even as luxury executive transports. The DC-3's ruggedness and reliability made it a favorite amongst operators in developing countries, where it could handle the demands of harsh environments and limited infrastructure. Though the military versions of the Douglas plane were just modified airliners, but as we know now, the original design was so outstanding, it had a huge impact on aviation, and many of these planes are still flying today, 90 years after they first took to the skies. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.